Greetings, everyone. This is Drayton Boylston, and I'm with the Executive Coaching University, and we're glad that you're here with us today. And we're going to talk about compassion today. And we're going to give you some great information, and then we're going to do a little exercise toward the end. We're going to keep this very brief. It's going to be about 15 minutes. And certainly this will be accessible anytime that you want to view this at a future date or over again. And I would like to bring in a dear colleague of mine, Jenna Forster. Jenna, we've been teaching together for years and years, and she is really one of the foremost authorities on neuroscience and how the brain works and how to bring that into the workplace and the entire mindfulness landscape. So with that, I'm going to bring Jenna in, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Drayton. Hello, everybody. I am very happy to be here, and we're talking about one of my favorite subjects, which is compassion. So Drayton and I are going to take you on a little journey for about 15 minutes, as he said, and we're going to discuss mindfulness around compassion and how all of this fits together for you. So thanks, Drayton. You want me to kick it off with my thoughts on compassion?
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, great. So normally when we think of compassion, we're thinking about relieving the suffering of others. So it's really about taking someone's pain and reducing it. We always look outwards when we think about compassion. And today, Drayton and I are going to talk a little bit differently about that, because there's a couple of levels of compassion in our view, one of them being compassion outwards, so that we're paying attention to the people around us and what's happening. But also there's a level of self-compassion, which is really a missing piece in a lot of the workplaces that we enter into, and the understanding that people have even around this basic idea of compassion. You have anything you want to add on that, Drayton, before we move on?
When we do this work, Jenna, it's so interesting. There almost a few words that we never bring into the workplace. And one of those certainly is compassion and love and some of these other things that might scare some people off. So the word itself can bring many feelings for you. And as you maybe have conversations in the workplace around compassion, and as a leader talk about being more compassionate with your people, just know that for some people it may be a little uncomfortable at the start. And as you talk about it more and you demonstrate it, people will be much more open to receiving it.
And in my perspective, there's some really real reasons why we want to be able to even embrace the word compassion. In my specialty of brain science and how we really behave as leaders, how we interact in the workplace and in our everyday lives. When we avoid certain things, we tend to move in a more robotic state. So if we are failing to understand self-compassion, having compassion for ourselves, so understanding what it is that we are currently in or going through, we will normally move in a robotic state. So we're going to rely on past experiences and past behavior to get through whatever it is we're looking to do. So we want to slow down that process, and bringing words like compassion and perhaps even love as we move forward, it really allows us the space to have this conversation. So we enter into most of the things that we do, and we're entering into them from a place of habitual behavior, patterns, habits, those things that we know, those things that we have experienced in our past. It's like a luggage. We bring it in to everything that we're doing as we move forward. When we can bring mindfulness in, or being full of mind, into this situation or occurrence or conversation or whatever it is we're in, then we can really slow down that tape recorder, and we can start to be present in everything that we do, making us a lot more valuable in the place of leadership, more experienced in the place of behavior, all of those different things that really bring us to the next level.
Yeah, and Jenna, as you speak to those things, what it brings up for me is that it's all about awareness. When we slow down enough to be in the present moment, and we're aware that our behavior and the way we're showing up as a leader has an impact on others, we heighten that experience that we have in every single interaction. And it's slowing down enough, taking the deep breaths, the mindful moments that we've talked about, and the 3 deep breaths in and cleansing and just centering yourself and becoming present. And then you're going to show up in a much different way. But it starts with that awareness. And when you're aware that you may be coming across in a situation as not being so compassionate, and you can take the time, just slow down and take those breaths and then show up in a different way, it's going to really make an impact on the people that are around you.
It absolutely is. And I know you're a big advocate for the ripple effect, Drayton, and how we can affect change by who we are being. And this is a really big key to what I'm hearing you say here, and a big idea behind why we want to offer this information out is, who are we being in this moment? And it is moments. Our life is made up of moments. We tend to get trapped in the hamster wheel of always projecting forward. And when we aren't understanding things like compassion, then we're projecting the past. So we're really predicting an outcome based on our past experience instead of who we are in this present moment, what we know, and how we want to step forward.
Yeah, that's such an important thing. I love the autopilot and just drawing on, what we've done in the past. And what we're talking about here is taking an opportunity to shift and be aware of your behavior in that moment. And instead of just relying on those past experiences that may have benefited you and maybe not, and having that awareness, in this moment, that you're going to decide to take a different track or different response to the people that you're with, and then see what happens. And not think about your to-do list, not think about that next meeting that you have, but be fully present with that person that you're with right in this moment. And it could be on the phone, it could be eyes to eyes, but just being present in that moment and having compassion for that individual, no matter who they are. It's, we did the compassion meditation where we brought in, after we did the body scan, we brought in that person that may get under your skin. That's where the work is. That's where you're going to have enough of a challenge to really grow some good mindfulness muscles as you do this work, because with that person that knows your trigger points, it could be at work, it could be at home, but that person that knows how to get under your skin, you're going to have an opportunity to react or respond differently to them and come from a place of compassion and see what happens.
Absolutely. And when we understand that we interpret our world, and how we interpret the world actually creates our reality. So if we are interpreting in the same way we have always interpret, well, we're going to continue to get the same outcomes. And if we're looking to make any shifts or growth or development in any of the areas we wish to make, it's necessary to have that awareness, as you mentioned, so that we can stop, look, and listen. And we can really engage in that new way, perhaps, or in a different moment. I always say to some of the individuals I work with, if you're going to a meeting with an individual that you may be struggling with in the past, take a different route to the office, walk a different corridor, create a different experience, because those experiences are what are going to make it different for you. And that can be said also with these moments you're speaking about in the mindful moments, right? Before we enter into a situation that may be volatile, it may have conflict, it may not. If we just take those moments and take a couple of breaths and just be present and grounded right here and now, we will enter into this differently. Mm-hmm. And probably more effectively.
Absolutely. And I think it's, for a lot of this, it's really caring enough to do just that. Mm-hmm. So not caring about all of your stuff and not caring about all of your to-dos, not caring, first and foremost about your accomplishments or, your career path. But imagine showing up and dealing with people where you care first and foremost about them. And that's something that very few leaders do. It's all about our egos and our alpha and drive versus showing up and saying, I'm here to be of service to you in this moment, in this very moment. I'm here for you. And amazing things can happen when you do that.
Absolutely. And I love that. I want to bring that back around to something you said earlier about how we respond or react to those people around us. It can be said that the reactions we're having towards another individual is because that individual is a mirror to some of the parts of us that we aren't very comfortable with. So when we are wrapped up bringing our past forward and moving from that place instead of that awareness, we are actually just in this very responsive way. We're just, it's just ping pong ball. It's just going back and forth, and we're trying to engage differently, but we really can't because we haven't taken that time and created that space in order to shift how we are going to interact. So we're just responding. It's a softball pitch. We're just tossing it back and forth, and really the effectiveness is out the window because we label everything in our world. We label everything and everybody because it makes us feel comfortable with who we need to interact with, versus coming at it from who am I going to be in the situation? And can I come from this place of care and concern for another individual? Mm-hmm. Leaving the labels and the disconnection really out the door so that we can engage differently.
Yeah, and Jenna, as I think about that in particular, I think about, okay, all of this really starts with us and love for ourselves and self-compassion. And I'd love to hear you speak a little bit about that and how people can show up at loving themselves first, because we know that we have to give ourselves some love and cherish who we are and show up from that place in order to truly love others. So we have to start from that place of self. So you want to speak to that a little bit, just in terms of what people can do, how they can think about approaching it from loving themselves and have that go forward out into the workplace too.
Absolutely. So when we have a lot of negative self-talk that's happening for ourselves on a moment-by-moment basis, you've spoken about how many thoughts we have a day and how we can live in this thinking place all the time. We end up having this constant self-talk. Over 75% of the thoughts we have are negative, and they're mostly aimed back towards us. When we enter into anything coming from that place, it brings fear right with it. So fear is walking next to you, and you're walking into a situation with fear. What that does is it starts to amp up the level of control that you try to have. It amps up the level of separation you now have from the people around you and the disconnection. So this is creating these invisible barriers that we have with the people around us. And what's really driving that is that lack of self-compassion, that lack of self-acceptance, letting go of the judgment, the shame, the fear that we have built like armor around ourselves. And that can really happen through self-compassion. So understanding this is who I am and this is how I'm behaving. However, not coming with that big cloak of shame and judgment and guilt around that, which really does follow us around. So we're going to take you through in a couple minutes one exercise that we can use in order to shift that for you in the moment. But just understanding that how you feel about yourself, like attracts like. So we are magnets, and we will bring people into our lives to reaffirm what we believe about ourselves. So until we can step out of that, it's very, very difficult to make these kinds of shifts. So really self-compassion is key in all of this.
Yeah, and Jenna, as I think about that in particular, I think about all of you that are out there listening to this, it takes courage to be vulnerable. And you are going to feel vulnerable as you make some of these shifts in awareness in the way you choose to lead and the way you come across to other people. There is a component of vulnerability that, quite frankly, most business people, myself included, are really challenged by. We want to be 10 feet tall and bulletproof, and we want to be, this person that people look up to, and we want to do the right things and show that we're a good leader. And the reality is the people want to know that you're real. And in order for us to show up as true human beings, we need to show up at times and be vulnerable and not know what the conversation is going to entail and not know where it's going to go. And embrace that vulnerability, because that shows true courage. And that shows so much caring for the people that you're with in the workplace or out. And when you show up and say, I don't know, three major words in the leadership manual, I don't know. Well, the fact is we don't know a lot of things. And to show up and say, I'm going to care enough as a human being to really listen to you and put your interests above mine and maintain the love that I have for myself at the same time. And so my hat's off to anyone that's listening to this that has the courage to A, listen to it, and hopefully B, put it into practice, because it takes a ton of courage to be vulnerable, especially in the workplace.
Absolutely. And I think the word that isn't necessarily put next to the word vulnerable, but belongs there, is strength. It takes a great deal of strength, and vulnerability is strength. We tend to, in our society, put it into a place of it being a negative connotation. In my experience, both personal and in the workforce, those individuals that can allow spaces of vulnerability, those are the people that they come across stronger. They come across as having a true strength, because they're not trying to project anything forward. They're bringing themselves to the party, if you will. I love that you brought that up. One of the things just about compassion is it is a learned skill. It can be practiced and it can be built. I always think of our brain like a deck of cards. It's really how you play them. And when this is part of our want in putting this out, in playing those deck of cards differently than perhaps we have in the past. So one of the methods that we use in order to bring ourselves back down and really be in that place of strength and effectiveness is to breathe. We talk about that a lot. The reason we do that is because we have two sides of our nervous system, and when we're living in the stress side of our nervous system, we are no longer thinking. The blood flow actually stops going to the front of the brain, which stops reasoning and logic from happening. So you have left the building. When you breathe, you actually shift that nervous system to your rest, digest, healing side, and that will allow you to be a lot more effective. It allows the blood flow through your entire brain, and it lets you use all of your capacity in what you're doing. So do you want to add anything to that, Drayton, before we enter into the actual exercise we want to do?
I love that. I just immediately thought of Elvis and leaving the building. And that's really what happens, folks, is that when we don't show up with that level of awareness, we're just a ghost around the house or ghost around the workplace, because our brains literally are taking us somewhere else versus where we are in that present moment.
Mm-hmm. And it's physical. It's proven. They do brain scans. So being tougher doesn't actually take this issue away. So that's the trick. So let's just take a couple minutes here as a group and try to slow our system down so we can switch into that side of our nervous system that's way more effective, and enter into whatever's next on our plate in this place of compassion, so that we can be there for ourselves and others in more moments than perhaps we have in the past. So we're just going to, if we're standing, just feet planted on the floor, feeling them, all of your feet on the floor. Most of us crunch our toes up, and so we aren't actually standing with our whole feet. Or if we're sitting, feeling the chair around us so that we can just get present. This brings us into our body so that we are not going to be as distracted as perhaps we could be. And let's close our eyes and take a couple of deep breaths. When we're breathing in, just say to yourself, breathe in. When we're breathing out, say, breathe out. Let's do that 3 times. Once we're grounded and we feel ourselves in our body, we tend to move through life outside of our body. I would like for you to think about the next person that you're going to encounter in the workplace and send them peace. May you find peace. Feel that statement and send it to them in this very moment. May you find peace. Feel that. Be with that. Take a deep breath. Let it out. And we can slowly open our eyes and move into our next conversation, wishing them peace.
I'm feeling pretty peaceful right now, Jenna. I love that. And I think it's as simple and straightforward as what you just demonstrated is we can show up and just wish well for others and wish them peace and do the same for ourselves. So when you have those negative thoughts, the ones that are rumbling around our head at all times, it seems, just wish yourself some peace and then show up from that place of peace and wish it for others. And that's what we're talking about with this whole subject of compassion. Starts with yourself and radiates out to others as you encounter them. Jenna, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Great, extremely helpful. And I hope this is a benefit to everyone that's listening to it and watching it. And stay tuned. We'll have more webinars as we go forward. So until then, take good care.
Bye-bye.